The candle went out 3 times before Aria Whitlock realized someone was standing behind her. She knelt on the wet stone of the cliffside cemetery, wind tearing at her coat, fingers numb around the matchbox. The flame had caught once, twice, 3 times on the white pillar candle she'd set beside Thomas's headstone, and each time the Atlantic gale had snuffed it like a cruel joke. 4 years of this. 4 years of climbing the narrow path up from the coast road, boots slipping on moss-slick steps to light a candle that would blow out before she made it back down. She struck another match. The flame wavered, died. Damn it! Allow me! Aria twisted around so fast she nearly knocked the candle off its stone shelf. A man stood 3 feet behind her, impossibly tall, impossibly still in wind that made her coat snap like a sail. He wore dark clothes that seemed tailored for a different century, and his hair fell white and straight past his shoulders. His skin matched it, pale as the marble headstones around them. She should have heard him approach. The cemetery path was gravel and old wood. "I didn't mean to startle you." His voice was low, careful, not apologetic exactly, just factual. "Well, you did." Aria got to her feet, clutching the matchbox. Her heart hammered. "This is a private moment." "I know." He moved then, a single fluid step that brought him beside her rather than looming over her. He positioned himself between her and the ocean wind, and suddenly the air went still. "Try now." She stared at him. His eyes were dark gray, almost colorless in the dim coastal light. His expression gave away nothing. "The candle," he said. "Light it now." Something about the command in his tone made her want to argue, but her hands were already moving, striking the match. The flame caught. She touched it to the wick, and this time the candle bloomed into steady light, sheltered in the pocket of stillness the stranger's body created. She exhaled. "Thank you." He inclined his head. The gesture looked ancient, formal. "You come every year?" It wasn't a question. Aria felt a prickle of unease chase up her spine. "Do you watch the cemetery often, or just me specifically?" "I walk here sometimes." He looked down at the headstone, reading the inscription she knew by heart. Thomas Whitlock, beloved husband, taken too soon. He was young. 32. The old grief sat heavy in her chest, familiar as a winter coat. Car accident, black ice on the coast road. The stranger said nothing. He didn't offer condolences, didn't tell her Thomas was in a better place, didn't ask if she was doing okay. He just stood there, blocking the wind, a marble statue of a man keeping her small flame alive. "I should go." Aria tucked the matches into her pocket. "His family will be waiting." "They make you come here." Another non-question. She bristled. "They don't make me do anything. I want to remember him." "But they make you prove it." The stranger's gaze shifted to her, sharp and too knowing. "Every year, every anniversary, light the candle, show the grief, demonstrate the loyalty." Aria opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He wasn't wrong. Thomas's mother had called yesterday to remind her about the cemetery visit, as if she could forget. His sister had sent flowers to Aria's apartment with a card that said, "We know you'll honor him properly." Even her own mother had phoned to say it would be disrespectful not to go, that people were watching, that a widow should act like a widow. "I loved my husband," she said quietly. "I know." The stranger looked back at the candle. "That's why you came despite the storm. That's why you tried 4 times before I interfered." He paused. "But love shouldn't be a performance." The wind howled around them, kept at bay by his presence. Aria watched the candle flame dance, steady and bright, and felt something crack open in her chest. "Who are you?" she asked. "A stranger who noticed your dedication." He stepped back then, letting the wind rush between them. The candle flickered, but held. "The worst has passed. It will stay lit now." He turned to leave, moving with that same unnatural grace. "Wait." Aria reached out, stopping just short of touching his sleeve. "What's your name?" He looked at her over his shoulder, white hair lifting in the breeze. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer, then, "Oren." "Oren," she repeated. It felt old in her mouth, like a word from a story. "I'm Aria." "I know." He said it gently, and then he was walking away, disappearing down the path between the headstones like mist. Aria stood alone with the candle in her dead husband's grave and wondered why her hands were shaking. Thomas's family lived in a sprawling Victorian house 10 minutes from the cemetery, all dark wood and heavy curtains and photographs of Thomas in every room. Aria had her own key. She'd offered to give it back a dozen times in 4 years. They'd refused every time. "There you are." Margaret Whitlock appeared in the foyer before Aria had even closed the door. Thomas's mother wore black, as she always did on the anniversary. "Did you light the candle?" "Yes." "Did it stay lit?" Aria thought of gray eyes and impossible stillness. "Yes, someone helped me shield it from the wind." Margaret's expression sharpened. "Someone? Who?" "A stranger. He was visiting the cemetery." "A man?" Thomas's sister Claire emerged from the sitting room, her voice pitched with something like accusation. "You let a strange man approach you at Thomas's grave?" "He was just being kind." "Kind," Claire said the word like it tasted bitter. "It's been 4 years, Aria. People talk. If you're seen with someone—" "I'm not seen with anyone." Aria stripped off her coat, hung it on the rack with more force than necessary. "He helped me light a candle. That's all." Margaret moved closer, her perfume overwhelming in the narrow foyer. "You know we don't judge you, dear. We know how hard this has been. But Thomas would want you to honor his memory properly. No distractions, no complications." Aria had heard this speech before, in 100 variations. She forced a smile. "I know. I'm not interested in complications." "Good." Margaret patted her arm. "Now come have tea. We've set out Thomas's favorite biscuits." The sitting room was a shrine. Thomas smiled down from frames on every surface, frozen at 32 forever. Aria took her usual chair and accepted a cup of tea she didn't want and let the family talk around her about their son, their brother, their beloved Thomas who had been taken too soon. They meant well. She knew they meant well. But Oren's words echoed in her head. Love shouldn't be a performance. She stayed an hour, then pleaded a headache and escaped. Her apartment was small, quiet, and blessedly free of photographs. She'd kept one picture of Thomas on her nightstand, a candid shot from their honeymoon where he was laughing at something off camera. The rest she'd packed away after the 2nd year, unable to bear the weight of being watched by memories. Aria made tea, real tea this time, the kind she actually liked, and curled up on her couch with a blanket. Rain started pattering against the windows. The coastal storm was settling in for the night. She thought about the stranger. Oren. White hair and white skin and that preternatural stillness. The way he'd moved without sound, appeared without warning. The way the wind hadn't touched him at all. She picked up her phone, hesitated, then opened a search browser. It took 3 tries to find the right combination of words. Finally, white hair, white skin, supernatural cemetery. The results loaded. Aria scrolled through folklore sites, urban legend forums, supernatural Wikipedia entries, and there it was, repeated across a dozen sources, vampires. She should have laughed. She should have closed the browser and gone to bed and forgotten the whole thing. Instead, she kept reading, pulse quickening with each new detail that fit, the pale skin, the stillness, the old-fashioned manner, the way he'd known things about her without asking, the way he'd blocked the wind like it was nothing. Aria set down her phone. She stared at the rain on the windows. She thought about the grief she carried like a stone, about Thomas's family who wanted her frozen in mourning forever, about the candle that went out every year until tonight. Then, she thought about gray eyes that had looked at her and seen something more than a widow. She was completely insane. She went back to the cemetery 3 days later. It wasn't the anniversary anymore. There was no reason to climb the cliff path. No family obligation to fulfill. But Aria found herself parking on the coast road in the late afternoon, boots crunching on gravel as she made her way up to the windswept grounds. The candle was still there beside Thomas's headstone, burned down to a stub. She knelt to remove it, tucking the remains into her bag to dispose of properly. "You came back." This time she didn't jump. She'd half expected him. Aria stood slowly, turning to face Oren where he stood between 2 weathered crosses. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said, "for helping with the candle." "You already thanked me." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "That's not why you're here." "No," Aria admitted. "I suppose it's not." He waited. The silence between them felt patient, not pressing. "Are you a vampire?" The question came out steadier than she'd expected. Oren's expression didn't change. Yes. Relief flooded through her, though she couldn't say why. Confirmation of the impossible should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something like vindication. How old are you? Old enough to have walked this cemetery when it was first consecrated. He moved closer, still careful, still measured. Old enough to have watched thousands of mourners come and go. But you've never helped any of them before. Another thing she somehow knew was true. No. His eyes held hers. I haven't. Why me? The wind picked up, lifting his white hair. He looked away, out toward the ocean barely visible through the graves and trees. Because you tried 4 times, because the wind was cruel and the path was dangerous and you had every reason to give up, but you kept striking matches. He looked back at her. Because your grief was real, not performed, and because I've seen 10,000 widows light 10,000 candles and none of them made me want to step forward until you. Aria's breath caught. I don't understand. Neither do I. He said it like a confession. I'm a king, Aria. I've ruled my people for 3 centuries. I don't interfere in human mourning. I don't break my own laws. What laws? The bereaved are sacred. Grief is sacred. A vampire who intrudes on genuine mourning, who tries to court someone still lost in loss. He shook his head. It's forbidden. Predatory. Wrong. But you're here. But I'm here. The admission seemed to cost him something, and I've come back every evening since, hoping you would too. Aria's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. I'm not ready for this. Whatever this is. I know. Oren's voice was soft. I'm not asking you to be ready. I'm not asking you for anything. But I want you to know that if you come back tomorrow, next week, next year, I'll be here. And I'll help you light the candle, or I'll just stand with you, or I'll leave you alone if that's what you need. Whatever honors both Thomas and you. Something in her wanted to cry. Something else wanted to laugh. She did neither, just nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, he echoed. Then, carefully, you should go. The sun is setting and the path is dangerous in twilight. Aria glanced at the darkening sky. What about you? I'll walk after dark. It's safer for me that way. Right. Vampire. The sunlight weakness. She'd read about that. She started toward the path, then paused. Oren, thank you for being honest. Always, he said, and she believed him. The next 2 months passed in a strange new rhythm. Aria went about her life work at the bookstore, dinners with friends, dutiful visits to Thomas's family, but twice a week she found herself driving to the cemetery in the evening. Sometimes she brought flowers for Thomas's grave. Sometimes she just sat on the stone bench near his headstone and watched the ocean. And Oren was always there. He never presumed, never pushed. Sometimes they talked for hours, his stories of centuries past unwinding in that low, careful voice. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. He told her about the vampire court hidden beneath the city, about the ancient laws that governed his people, about the loneliness of immortality. She told him about Thomas, about their short marriage, about the grief that had defined her for 4 years. His family wants me to stay frozen, she said one night, perched on the bench while Oren stood nearby. They want me to be Thomas's widow forever, never move forward, never change. What do you want? Oren asked. Aria looked up at the stars. I don't know anymore. I loved him. I still love him. But sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating under the weight of everyone else's expectations of my grief. Grief and growth aren't mutually exclusive. Oren's eyes were gentle. You can love what you lost and still choose to live again. Is that what you think I should do? It doesn't matter what I think, only what you choose. But it did matter, she realized. His opinion mattered more than it should. The truth was, she looked forward to these evenings more than anything else in her week. She thought about him at odd moments while shelving books, while making dinner, while lying in bed at night. The way he listened, truly listened, without trying to fix her or rush her healing. The way he treated her grief as something real and valid, but not something that defined her entirely. The way he looked at her like she was more than Thomas's widow. It terrified her. It thrilled her. It felt like betrayal and possibility all at once. "Tell me about your laws," she said one evening. They were sitting side by side on the bench now, close but not touching. The ones about courting the bereaved. Oren was quiet for a long moment. A vampire's power can be overwhelming to humans. Our presence, our persuasion, it can make people believe they feel things they don't. The law exists to protect people in vulnerable states from being manipulated when they're not thinking clearly. And you think I'm vulnerable? I think you're strong. But I also think you've spent 4 years with people telling you how to feel and what to do. I won't be another voice trying to control your grief. Aria turned to face him. What if I want you to be more than a voice? His expression went very still. Aria, I'm not saying I'm ready for anything serious. I'm not even sure what I'm asking for. But I need you to know that when I come here, it's not just about Thomas anymore. She took a breath. It's about you too. There's a complication. Oren's voice was strained. Your husband, Thomas, he was under my protection. Aria blinked. What? He didn't know it. Most humans don't, but the coast road where he died, it cuts through old vampire territory. Anyone who lives in this city is technically under the protection of my court. We keep the roads safe, keep the dangerous ones of our kind away. But 4 years ago, I was dealing with a challenge to my rule. I was distracted. And the night Thomas died? He stopped, jaw tight. I should have sensed the black ice, should have sent someone to clear it or close the road. I failed in my duty to protect him. Horror and understanding crashed through her. So you can't court me because of some ancient law about protecting the dead man's. I can't court you because I owe him a debt I can never repay. Oren looked at her, raw pain in his eyes for the first time. How can I ask for your heart when I failed to save his? Aria reached out and took his hand. His skin was cool, solid. He went absolutely still under her touch. Thomas's death wasn't your fault, she said quietly. It was an accident, a terrible, random accident. You didn't put the ice on the road. You didn't fail him. The law says, I don't care what the law says. Her grip tightened. I care what I say, and I'm telling you that you don't owe Thomas anything. He wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want me frozen in grief forever, and he wouldn't want you torturing yourself over something you couldn't control. You can't absolve me. Maybe not. But I can choose what I do with my own life, with my own heart. She swallowed hard. And I'm choosing to keep coming here, to keep seeing you, to see where this goes, if you want that too. Oren looked down at their joined hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I want that more than I have any right to. Then we'll figure it out, Aria said. Together. He raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles so gentle it made her chest ache. Together, he agreed. But the vampire law was only the first problem. Margaret called 2 weeks later, her voice tight. Claire saw you, at the cemetery, with a man. Aria closed her eyes. She was in her apartment, phone pressed to her ear, and already she knew this conversation would be awful. It's not what you think. She said you were holding hands, sitting together by Thomas's grave, holding hands with some white-haired stranger. His name is Oren, and he's my friend. Your friend? Margaret's voice cracked. Thomas has been dead 4 years, Aria. 4 years. How can you do this to him, to us? I'm not doing anything to anyone. I'm just living my life. By replacing him? By bringing your new boyfriend to his grave? I'm not replacing him. Aria was on her feet now, pacing. I loved Thomas. I still love Thomas. But he's gone, Margaret, and I can't spend the rest of my life performing grief to make you comfortable. Silence. Then, if you do this, if you move on, if you're seen with this man, you're not welcome in this family anymore. The words hit like a slap. You don't mean that. Thomas's father and I have discussed it. Claire agrees. We won't enable you to disrespect our son's memory. You're either his widow or you're nothing to us. The line went dead. Aria sank onto her couch, phone still clutched in her hand, and finally let herself cry. Not for Thomas, not this time. For the family she'd tried so hard to keep, for the impossible choice they were forcing her to make, for the guilt that chewed at her even though she knew logically she had nothing to feel guilty for. She cried for the widow she'd been and the woman she was trying to become. When the tears finally stopped, she picked up her phone and sent a text to the number Oren had given her weeks ago. Can you meet me? Not the cemetery, somewhere else. The response came immediately. Where? My place. I'll send the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 15. Aria opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, concern etched in every line of his face. He took one look at her red eyes, blotchy cheeks, and stepped inside, pulling her into his arms without a word. She let herself lean into him, let herself take comfort in his solid presence. He was cool and steady and absolutely there, one hand stroking her hair, the other wrapped around her back. Tell me, he said softly. So she did. All of it. Margaret's ultimatum, the threat to cut her off, the years of pressure and performance and impossible expectations. He listened without interrupting, his jaw going tight when she repeated the cruelest parts. They have no right, he said when she finally fell silent. No right to dictate your grief or your future. They're his family. And you were his wife. You loved him, mourned him, honored him. You don't owe them your entire life. Aria pulled back enough to look up at him. What if they're right, though? What if it's too soon? What if I'm betraying Thomas by feeling things for you? Oren cupped her face in his hands, gentle and sure. Listen to me. Grief doesn't have a timeline. There's no too soon or too late. There's only what feels true to you. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. And I have watched humans mourn for 3 centuries, Aria. I have seen love and loss in every possible form. What you feel isn't betrayal. It's healing. It's choosing life again. But the guilt will fade. His voice was certain. Not the love, never the love, but the guilt that says you can't move forward. That will fade, if you let it. She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't thought through. She just tilted her face up and pressed her lips to his, and for a moment the world went absolutely still. Oren froze. Then he was kissing her back, careful and controlled and devastatingly tender. His hands stayed on her face, thumbs stroking soft circles, his mouth warm despite the coolness of his skin. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I want you to be sure, he whispered. I want you to choose this freely, not because you're angry at his family or because I'm here, because once you choose me, Aria, I'm yours, for as long as you'll have me, and I need to know you want that. I want it. Her voice was steady now, certain. I want you. Not as a replacement for Thomas, not as rebellion, just because you're you, and because somewhere in the last 2 months you've become essential to me. His smile was small, real, and entirely hers. Then you have me. They stood in her apartment doorway, wrapped in each other, and Aria felt something in her chest that had been locked tight for 4 years finally begin to open. The next 6 months unfolded like a story she'd never dared to imagine. Oren was unfailingly patient, letting her set the pace, but once Aria made her choice, she found herself hungry for more. More time with him, more conversations, more stolen moments in her apartment or walking the city streets after dark. He introduced her to his world slowly. The hidden court beneath the city, housed in converted catacombs that had been expanded and refined over centuries. The vampire nobles who bowed to Oren with a deference that made her stomach flip. The blood laws, the ancient protocols, the delicate balance between vampire and human societies. They're afraid of you, she said one night, watching the court from the edge of the throne room. Oren stood at the center, addressing his people about some territorial dispute, and every vampire in the room watched him with wary respect. They're afraid of any king, said a voice beside her. Aria turned to find a female vampire with silver hair and amusement in her red eyes. But they're also afraid of you. Me? Why? Because Oren Ashenfell hasn't looked at anyone the way he looks at you in 300 years. Because you're human and breakable, and he would burn this court to the ground if anyone touched you. The woman held out her hand. I'm Seraphine, second of the court. Aria shook carefully. Aria Whitlock. I know. Seraphine's smile was sharp. You're the widow who made the king forget himself. I didn't mean to. No one ever does. Seraphine glanced back at Oren, who had finished speaking and was already moving toward them. But between you and me, it's good for him. He's been alone too long. Oren reached them, his hand immediately finding the small of Aria's back. Seraphine, Stop intimidating my... He paused, as if not sure what to call her. Girlfriend? Aria supplied, raising an eyebrow. His mouth curved. Girlfriend. Seraphine laughed and swept away, leaving them alone in the corner of the throne room. Was that okay? Aria asked, claiming the title. More than okay. Oren drew her closer. Though I should warn you, the court will want to formalize it eventually, if we continue. Formalize it how? Acknowledgement, bonding ceremony, eventually. He hesitated. Turning, if you wanted it. Aria's breath caught. They'd danced around the topic of immortality before, but never directly addressed it. Would I have to become a vampire? No, many human consorts stay human their whole lives, but you should know the option exists if you ever chose it. His eyes searched hers. Years from now, decades, only if you wanted it. And if I did? Her heart was racing. If I chose turning, then I would give you immortality, and every year after. She kissed him there, in front of the court, and didn't care who saw. But the human world was less forgiving. Aria's mother confronted her over lunch 2 weeks later. Margaret called me. She says you've taken up with some man, that you've abandoned Thomas's memory. I haven't abandoned anything, Mom. Then why won't you visit his grave anymore? Aria set down her fork. I do visit, just not when his family demands it, and not to perform grief for an audience. That's what love is sometimes, performance, showing up even when it's hard. Love isn't performance. Oren's words, but they felt true in her mouth. Love is real and private and mine to define. Not Margaret's, not yours, mine. Her mother's face crumpled. I just don't want you to regret this, to throw away 4 years of honoring Thomas for some new man you barely know. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm choosing to live again. There's a difference. But what will people think? I don't care. And she realized, saying it, that it was true. I don't care what people think anymore. I care what I think, what I feel. And I feel alive for the first time in 4 years, Mom. Can't you be happy for me? Her mother looked away. I don't know. It hurt, but Aria had expected it. Change always hurt before it healed. She left the restaurant and drove straight to the warehouse district where Oren kept a private residence separate from the court. He answered on the first knock, took one look at her face, and pulled her inside. Tell me what you need, he said. You. Just you. So he gave her that. They spent the night tangled together on his couch, talking and kissing and planning a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. He told her about a lighthouse on the coast, abandoned for decades, that he'd been thinking of restoring. She told him about her dream of opening her own bookstore, something small and specialized. We could do both, he said, fingers tracing patterns on her arm. Restore the lighthouse together, make it ours, and I could help finance the bookstore. I don't want your money. It's not charity, it's partnership, he kissed her temple. You give me something to care about beyond court politics. Let me give you something back. Aria thought about it. A lighthouse on the coast, a bookstore filled with stories, a life built with someone who saw her as more than a widow. Okay, she said. Partners. Partners, he agreed. The anniversary arrived again, 5 years after Thomas's death. Aria drove to the cemetery alone, parked on the coast road, climbed the familiar cliff path. She carried a candle, the same kind she'd brought every year, and a new sense of certainty in her chest. Thomas's grave looked the same. Weathered stone, simple inscription, the shelf where she'd always set the candle. She knelt down, placed the candle carefully, and pulled out her matches. The wind was brutal, just like 5 years ago. The first match blew out. The second. Allow me. She smiled. Oren stepped into place behind her, blocking the wind with his body, creating that pocket of stillness. She struck the third match and lit the candle. It caught, held, burned steady. Thank you, she said, standing. Always. He wrapped an arm around her waist. Do you want to be alone? No. Aria leaned into him, looking down at Thomas's name carved in stone. I want you here. I think he'd want you here too. They stood together in the wind, the candle flickering but holding, and Aria said a different kind of goodbye, not to Thomas's memory. That would always be with her. But to the grief that had defined her, to the guilt that had held her frozen, to the version of herself who couldn't imagine wanting more than mourning. I'll always love you, she whispered to the headstone, "but I'm choosing to live now. I hope you understand." The wind seemed to soften, just for a moment. Or maybe she imagined it. Oren pressed a kiss to her hair. "Ready to go?" "Almost?" Aria turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I want to do it. The turning." He went very still. "Aria. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. A year, maybe 2. I want to give this enough time to be sure, but I am sure, Oren. I want the long road. With you." His hands came up to frame her face, and she saw something like awe in his eyes. "You're certain? This isn't about grief or pressure or... It's about choosing life, real life, with the person who taught me I could." She smiled. "You shielded my flame from the wind when I needed it most. Let me choose to keep burning. Let me choose forever with you." "Yes." The word came out rough, choked. "Yes, Aria, whenever you're ready, however long you need." They kissed there by Thomas's grave, the candle burning beside them, and it felt like blessing rather than betrayal. Telling Thomas's family was harder. Aria requested a meeting at their house, brought Oren with her. Margaret answered the door, took one look at them standing together, and her face went cold. "I see you've made your choice." "I have," Aria kept her voice steady, "and I want to explain it to you if you'll let me." Margaret stood aside, lips thin. They entered the sitting room, where Thomas smiled down from a dozen photographs. Claire was already there, arms crossed. Thomas's father sat in his usual chair, looking older than Aria remembered. "This is Oren Ashenfell," Aria said. "He's important to me, and I'm going to keep seeing him. But I want you to understand that it doesn't mean I've forgotten Thomas or stopped loving him or dishonored his memory." "You brought your boyfriend to our house?" Claire's voice shook with anger. "To the place where Thomas lived. How is that not disrespectful?" "Because I'm trying to build a bridge between my past and my future." Aria looked at Margaret. "You said I had to choose, that I was either Thomas's widow or nothing to you, but I'm asking you to let me be both. Let me be someone who loved your son and always will, and also someone who's choosing to live again." "With a vampire." Margaret spat the word like it was poison. "Yes, Claire told me what she found out. You're planning to become one of them, to throw away your humanity for this thing." Oren's expression didn't change, but Aria felt him tense beside her. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Oren is not a thing. He's a person who has shown me more respect and understanding in 6 months than anyone else has in 4 years. And yes, I'm considering turning, not now, but eventually, because I want a future with him." "Then you're not our daughter anymore," Margaret's voice broke. "If you do this, if you choose him over Thomas's memory, you're no longer part of this family." Aria felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I'm not choosing him over Thomas. I'm choosing both. I'm choosing to honor what I had and embrace what I can have. And if you can't accept that, then I'm sorry. But I won't give up my future to keep your approval." Thomas's father spoke for the first time, his voice quiet. "She's right, Margaret." Everyone turned to stare at him. He looked at Aria, eyes sad but clear. "Thomas wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want you frozen in grief forever. He loved you. He'd want you happy." "Don't you dare speak for our son," Margaret started. "I'm speaking for the boy I raised." Thomas's father stood, moved to Aria. He was kind. He was generous. And he would be furious with us for trying to trap you in mourning. He took her free hand, squeezed it gently. "I'm sorry we made you feel like you couldn't move forward. I'm sorry we put our grief above your healing." Aria's tears spilled over. "Thank you." He nodded, then looked at Oren. "You'll take care of her?" "With everything I am," Oren said quietly. "Then I give you my blessing." He glanced back at Margaret and Claire. "Both of you should too." Margaret was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. Claire looked torn between anger and understanding. The room felt crystallized, balanced on the edge of something breaking or healing. Finally, Margaret spoke. "I can't give my blessing, not yet, maybe not ever. But," she took a shaking breath, "but I won't cut you off. If you want to visit, if you want to stay in touch, I'll try. I can't promise more than that." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't approval, but it was a door left open, and that was enough. "Thank you," Aria whispered. They left shortly after, climbing into Oren's car in silence. Once they were on the road, Aria let out a long, shaky breath. That was awful. You were magnificent. Oren reached over, took her hand. You stood your ground. You honored both of them, Thomas and us. His father surprised me. Grief makes people hold on too tight sometimes. But love, real love, knows when to let go. He lifted her hand, kissed her knuckles. Thomas's father understood that. The others will too, eventually. And if they don't? Then we build our life anyway, together. Together. The word felt like a promise. The lighthouse restoration took 18 months. They worked on it every weekend, stripping away decades of neglect, revealing the beauty underneath. Oren handled the structural repairs with vampire strength. Aria chose paint colors, found furniture, turned the keeper's cottage into something livable and warm. Her bookstore opened 6 months into the restoration, a cozy space in the arts district specializing in rare books and vampire literature. Oren's court patronized it heavily, delighted by the novelty of a human shop owner who knew their king so intimately. Human customers came for the selection and stayed for the atmosphere. Aria found herself happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy. She still visited Thomas's grave, but less frequently now, and always without guilt. Sometimes Oren came with her, sometimes she went alone. The candle didn't blow out anymore either because the wind had changed, or because she'd learned the trick of sheltering the flame herself. Margaret called occasionally. Stiff conversations at first, gradually warming. Claire sent a card on Aria's birthday. Thomas's father visited the bookstore once, looked around and told her Thomas would have been proud. It was enough. On a cold November evening, nearly 2 years after that first meeting in the cemetery, Oren drove Aria to the lighthouse. It was finished now, fully restored, the light mechanism repaired and gleaming. He led her up the spiral stairs to the lamp room at the top. "I have something to ask you," he said. Aria's heart kicked up. They stood surrounded by glass, the ocean stretching dark and vast below them, the beam of light sweeping across the water. Oren took her hands. "I know we've talked about turning, about forever, and I know you wanted to wait to be sure. But I need to know—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Are you still sure? Is this still what you want?" "Yes." No hesitation. "I want forever with you, Oren. I'm ready." He closed his eyes briefly, relief washing over his features. When he opened them again, they glowed faintly red. "Then I have a gift for you, a tradition in my court, for humans who choose turning." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it. Inside lay a ring, old silver with a blood-red stone. "This isn't an engagement ring exactly. It's a claiming, a promise. It tells my court that you're mine, that I intend to turn you, that anyone who touches you answers to me." He looked at her intently. "Will you wear it?" "Yes." Aria held out her hand steady. "Yes to all of it." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the stone catching the lighthouse beam. Then he cupped her face and kissed her, deep and claiming and full of promise. When they broke apart, Aria whispered, "When?" "Whenever you choose. Tonight, next month, next year." She thought about it. About the life she'd built, the grief she'd processed, the future stretching bright ahead. "Tonight," she decided. "I don't want to wait anymore." Oren searched her face. "You're absolutely certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything." So he turned her there, in the lighthouse they had restored together. His bite was controlled, precise, taking just enough blood to bring her to the edge. Then he opened his own wrist and held it to her lips. "Drink," he murmured, "and choose forever." Aria drank. The transformation was pain and fire and transcendence all at once. Oren held her through it, whispering reassurances, his presence an anchor. When it finally faded, when she opened her eyes to a world suddenly sharper, brighter, more alive than she'd ever imagined, he was there. "Welcome back," he said softly. Aria sat up, marveling. She could hear the ocean crashing against rocks hundreds of feet below, could smell salt and stone and Oren's scent, complex and perfect, could see in the darkness as clearly as day. "How do you feel?" Oren asked. She took inventory, stronger, faster, hungry, but not unbearably so. And underneath it all, a profound sense of rightness. "I feel alive," she said, "really, truly alive." He smiled, pulled her close. "Good. Because we have a very long future ahead of us. They stayed in the lighthouse that night, Oren teaching her the basics of her new existence, how to manage the hunger, how to move with her new speed, how to control her strength so she didn't break everything she touched. "It'll take time to adjust," he said. "Months, maybe years, but I'll be with you every step." "I know." Aria looked out at the ocean, at the beam of light cutting through the darkness. "This is perfect. The lighthouse, us, all of it." "There's one more thing." Oren moved to a shelf near the window, retrieved something. A white pillar candle, twin to the ones she'd lit at Thomas's grave for 5 years. He placed it in the lighthouse window. "I thought we could keep one burning, always, a reminder of where we started, of what you survived, of the flame that brought us together." Aria's throat tightened. She took his hand, held tight. "A flame you shielded from the wind. A flame you kept trying to light." He kissed her forehead. "Your strength, Aria. Never mine." She lit the candle with the matches from her pocket, the same box she'd carried that first night, preserved out of sentiment. The wick caught easily, burned steady in the protected window. They stood together, the lighthouse beam turning overhead, the memorial candle glowing beside them, and Aria felt the last piece of her grief finally settle into peace. Thomas would always be part of her story, the man she'd loved, the loss she'd survived, the grief that had shaped her. But he wasn't the end of her story. Just a chapter, bittersweet and real, that had led her here. To Oren, to immortality, to a future built on choice and healing and love that didn't replace what came before, but grew alongside it. The candle burned in the lighthouse window and would burn there forever. A memorial and a promise. A reminder that grief and joy could coexist, that honoring the dead didn't mean forgetting to live. Years passed, measured differently now. Aria grew into her vampire nature, into her role as the king's consort. The court accepted her fully once she proved herself capable, intelligent, worthy of Oren's devotion. She kept the bookstore, expanded it, became a bridge between human and vampire communities. Margaret eventually reconciled with her, drawn back by the realization that cutting Aria off meant cutting off Thomas's memory too. They would never be close, but they managed a careful peace. Claire even visited the lighthouse once, stood looking at the memorial candle, and said quietly, "Thomas would have liked this, you keeping a light for him." "I always will," Aria promised. Oren ruled his court with Aria at his side, their partnership strengthening over decades. He was king, powerful and commanding, but with her, he was simply Oren, devoted, protective, occasionally vulnerable in ways he showed no one else. On the 50th anniversary of Thomas's death, they climbed the cliff path to the cemetery together. The cemetery had changed, new graves added, old ones weathered further. Thomas's headstone stood the test of time, his name still clear. Aria knelt, placed a candle on the familiar shelf. The wind was brutal, just like always. Oren stepped behind her, blocking the gale. She lit the match, touched it to the wick. The flame caught and held. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Oren or Thomas or the universe itself. "For the love, for the loss, for leading me here." Oren's hand found her shoulder, warm and steady despite his vampire nature. She'd learned centuries ago that touch warmed with emotion, that vampires weren't truly cold when they cared. They stood in the cemetery as the sun set, the candle burning brave and bright, two immortals honoring a mortal life that had mattered. That would always matter. Then, they walked back down the cliff path hand in hand, back to the lighthouse where their own candle still burned in the window and would burn for centuries more. A light against the darkness, a promise kept, a love that had learned to hold both grief and joy, both memory and future, both the widow's sorrow and the immortal's devotion. And if sometimes the wind seemed gentler around that lighthouse, the flame burning steadier than physics should allow, well, maybe Thomas understood after all. Maybe the dead could bless the living, when the living chose to honor them not through endless mourning, but through choosing to live fully, love completely, and keep the light burning. Oren pulled Aria close as they reached the lighthouse door, kissed her temple. "Ready to go in?" She looked up at the beam cutting through the gathering dark, at the small, steady glow of the memorial candle in the window. "Ready?" she said. They crossed the threshold together, closing the door on the past, opening it to the future. Behind them, the candle burned on a widow's tribute and a vampire king's gift, flame sheltered from the wind for all eternity.